Hi.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. This is exciting, yeah?
I know. This is our first podcast ever.
I know.
I think we're going to look back on this and cringe at how horrible we did on our first try.
Yeah. But the good news is the only people that are going to listen to it are like our parents and our spouses. So
that's right.
It'll be a small audience of failure that we have there.
So our first show ever. I'm Mike.
I'm Maggie.
And this is Friends on Fire.
Friends on Fire. Well, we got to get that.
I don't think we can say it at the same time.
Okay.
We'll never get that right.
We could try.
How about you go?
Okay. I'm Maggie.
I'm Mike.
And we're Friends on Fire. No, I thought you were going to say it with me.
No, I deliberately do not want to do it together.
Let's just try it once together.
Okay, fine.
I'm Mike.
No. I'm Mike.
I'm Maggie. And we're Friends on Fire.
That sounded horrible. Why did we decide to do this podcast?
We started talking a lot about money at work, personal finance money and like life goals and financial freedom and other things. And we thought it'd be fun to do something related to that together. And we thought we should do a podcast, and friends don't talk about money enough. So we should talk about money.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting that not only do people not talk about money, but the benefits of talking about money are really outstanding. Like, we became very good friends because we talked about money.
Yeah.
So why do you think that is?
I think there's a like quicker process of like vulnerability and getting to know each other from like sharing your expenses, and not just your expenses, but like your life goals and what's important to you, and the decisions you make and why. And then I think it was really, actually, I found it like to be fun and challenging to like look at other people's expenses. Like, you were very open, Mike, in terms of like sharing the details of like your monthly expenses and like what your family spends money on. And it challenged me in a lot of ways where I thought I was already pretty frugal to think differently. And honestly, just there's always curiosity. Like, I'm always like super curious about other people's financial situations, because in a way I'm sort of so obsessed with my own that I'll see someone driving down a street in a Mercedes that I know, and I'm like, how do they afford that? What are they, leasing it? Is it on credit? Are they, just do they have a bunch of credit card debt? Like, I'm always very curious about other people's financial situations. And so I thought it was really cool this is a super long answer. This is my problem.
Yeah. You're going to need to like really shorten this stuff up. This is
what the question was.
This is a 2-person podcast.
It is.
And we need to share.
I legitimately forgot what the question was.
I forgot what the question was too. All right. So it was about, why did we become good friends talking about money?
Yes.
Now let me.
Okay. Yeah. What made you?
So I think one of the interesting things is that there was some quote, I don't remember who said it or what it was basically like, don't listen to what people say is important to them. Like, look at what they actually spend money on. And that is what is important to them. And if spending money on that Mercedes and they can't afford it, that is important to them. Like, who they are because of how they allocate their resources. And so I think that's one of the interesting things. Like, we got to know what was really important to each other because we talked about what we were spending money on. We realized that we both we care about travel. We don't care about clothes. We care about
care about some clothes. Quality over quantity. I'm a minimalist, but I do buy nice clothes.
Yeah, so the volume of Patagonia clothes that you have in your wardrobe, we will save for another podcast.
It's really good quality clothing. I'm wearing a Patagonia shirt right now, actually. I told you what happened to me earlier today. I had it's like beautiful weather in Atlanta right now. Totally not sure what our topic is right now, but I'm going to tell you a quick story. It was beautiful weather in Atlanta today, or it is beautiful weather in Atlanta today. And I decided to go for a quick run before Mike was going to come over and we were going to do this podcast. And I was like running through my neighborhood, a route that I frequently run. And I was having like an amazing time in terms of like my pace. I was just running very much faster than I normally run. I was feeling really good about it. And I was like literally running along thinking like, I'm so fast. I'm such a great runner. And then I tripped really bad on this like little raised portion of a sidewalk, and it was sort of at a very what's the word for like in the middle of nowhere? I don't know. Kind of in the middle of
nowhere.
I was kind of in the middle of nowhere. I was like in this little place that crosses a bridge in the woods between these two neighborhoods, a little cut through. So nobody was around, and I'm like cursing and I'm on the ground, and I'm like bleeding in multiple areas. I can't remember why I was telling you this story. I'm not kidding. There was a point to it at the beginning.
Maggie, we're trying to keep
Patagonia. The most upsetting part of me falling was realizing after I'm like, there's blood everywhere. And I'm like, I was about to call my husband to come and get me. And then I was like, no, I'm like tough. I'm going to get up and I'm going to either walk home or I'm going to keep running. And I was like maybe a mile from home. So I like walked for a while and then I started running again. And then after a while, I noticed that I had a hole from my fall in my Lululemon running tights, which was very upsetting. That was the point of this story.
Okay, so 2 points. One, we're trying to keep this show to about 30 minutes, and it will be impossible if you interject with super long, irrelevant stories.
I understand.
Okay.
I'm listening.
I don't know what my second point was. Oh, my second point was, do you normally give yourself pep talks like while you're running?
No, I wasn't really giving myself a pep talk. I was just like really gracious for how I was like appreciating how lovely the weather was and how fast I was running, because I'm usually a pretty slow runner. And so I was like, I'm running really nice. It's a beautiful day. Like, I'm just so lucky to be alive. And then literally I like fell on like all four, like every part of my body hit the ground at once. It's like, it was like I went up in the air and came down flat and then like skidded.
Yeah, I can see it. It looks horrible. Okay, let's try to redirect this ship back to the point of our podcast. Otherwise, this podcast will just turn into us just talking about random stuff that happens throughout the day.
Got it.
All right. So let's talk about like where we met and what we do professionally.
Yeah.
How about you start?
So I sit in meetings all day. What do you do?
I sit in meetings half the day and then work in Excel the other half the day.
Okay. Well, sorry, I shouldn't joke that I sit in meetings. I do have a real job. I work for a large hotel company and in marketing, essentially, in digital marketing. And I lead a fairly large team that manages a portion of our marketing efforts.
And I work for the same company in finance.
Yeah.
And so I support your organization.
Yeah, I frequently have to ask you to be able to spend money.
Yes, that's right. And I like to hold that power over your head
I know.
pretty regularly.
Yeah. He's a very tough very great finance business partner, but very frugal, you know? He's got a lot of questions. He really wants to know like why we're spending money. It's crazy.
So my job is about keeping the financial health of the organization and making sure that the business is being as efficient as possible, which is like very clearly relates to my personal finance hobby. But yours is a little bit different. You're focused on marketing and advertising and talking to consumers and managing a very large team and doing a lot of cool stuff. So like, how did you get into all this personal finance stuff? So
I have just always been a fairly frugal person my whole life. And I think I had a mix of like always just growing up being a little frugal because that's how my parents were. Part of it because that's how my dad was, I think, but also because we just didn't have, like, we had enough money, but we didn't have tons of extra money. And so we, didn't have like fancy cars or things like that. But, we had a nice house and a roof over our heads and, plenty of what we really needed. So I think that was a huge piece. I think I always had to work very hard for everything I had. Like, my parents didn't give us a lot of money. They didn't like put us through college. We had jobs at an early age. We had to like pay for our own car insurance, pay for our own gas. They helped us buy cars, things like that. But we had to do a lot on our own. And I think it just gave me respect and appreciation for like, you have to work hard for money. So I'm not going to just use it not thoughtfully. And then also, I had a little bit of this term that I thought I made up, but I once read about in a book called the bag lady syndrome.
I do that all the time.
Bag lady syndrome? Or you think you made it up?
I think I made it up. And I'm like, I think back to myself, man, that was a just really great tagline, really great idea. And I had read it a long time ago.
Yeah. So I probably didn't make this up. But there was actually a book, it was called The Bag Lady Papers. And it was about somebody who lost all their money in the Bernie Madoff scheme. And it finally put into words what had always been a somewhat irrational fear that I've had, which is no matter how well I did or how much money I had, I always thought that something would happen that would take it all away from me. And so because of that fear, sort of semi-irrational fear, I just always was like pretty good about saving. And I don't think nearly as good as you are, Mike, from the conversations we've had, but I thought I was, compared to the peers around me and like the average person around me, I was pretty good about saving, and I never increased my cost of living as I continued to make more money as I got older.
Yeah, so I think the difference between our savings rate is that I've been meticulously tracking it and measuring it and trying to improve it as like a performance metric of my own business. And you've just been frugal your whole life.
Yes.
So how did that frugalness transition into FIRE?
Well, I didn't know there was a term called FIRE. It's funny. Some of these questions I've not like really thought about until you are asking them. And that's why I'm kind of just...
I'm trying to do a hard-hitting interview for our first show.
I like it. What was the question again?
Oh my God. How did that frugalness transition into FIRE?
Okay. So I don't think I heard the term FIRE until a couple of years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And once I heard about this whole community called FIRE, I thought, oh, that's what I am. I just never knew a word to put on it. But I was always kind of like, I've always been a little obsessed with like the idea of like minimalism and having less stuff. And that's been something maybe over the past 5 to 7 years. I'm obsessed with tiny houses. Like I would love to live in a smaller space than I even live in now. I don't need a lot and I don't want a lot to be happy. And I also have worked incredibly hard over the past 20 years in my career, and even more than 20 years. Like I have been working nonstop since I was 14 years old, probably before that, babysitting. And I've worked really hard, and at times I've worked too hard and too much, and I've put work before other things. And I think just a lot of things as I was getting older were starting to converge into one, and I was realizing like there's a purpose to me being frugal. I want financial freedom. I don't want debt and other things hanging over my head and making me feel like I have to work to keep up some lifestyle or to pay something or to pay my mortgage or whatever it is. And the feeling, I mean, I didn't make up the term financial freedom, but like the freedom that comes from knowing that you're not tied to a specific job or a specific type of income you need is incredibly amazing. And like on my most stressed out days at work, I sometimes say to myself, like, I could walk away from all this now by choice and I'll be okay. And that is an amazing feeling.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is that we've both kind of come to the same place, but from different directions. So we had different upbringings. We got into frugalness in different ways and into FIRE in different ways. And now we are at the same company with similar net worths, with similar annual expenditures, very similar lifestyles, doing this podcast together. And so that's one of the things I think will be interesting to explore in future shows.
Yeah, I agree. So how did you get into this sort of whole FIRE thing?
So my parents retired very early. And
like how early?
42.
That's incredibly uncommon, especially back then.
Yeah. So it was. Did
your parents start the FIRE movement?
I don't think so. So there was a book called something like Living the American Dream, Retiring at 35. So FIRE movement, I think this concept comes up frequently during bull markets. So when people are doing quite well, the idea that they can live off investment returns and not work seems to propagate. So that's where we're at right now. So you have come across FIRE as we've been in like the longest bull market ever. And so my parents, they read this book, Retiring at 35, Living the American Dream, something like that. And he's like, I'm going to go do this. And so he started saving an incredible amount of money. And he had also been frugal his whole life.
What did they do for a living? Did they both work?
Yeah, they both worked. And my dad was in finance for a large Fortune 500 company.
Sounds familiar.
Fortune 500 company. And and I actually didn't start down that path, but that's a different story. So they saved a ton of money and then stopped working very early. So like I never really knew my parents having jobs. I never like went to their office. They never left in the morning.
What motivated them to do this? Like just their values and
Yeah, I think they wanted to go do other stuff. I mean, my parents liked working. They still do stuff, and they have been for the past 30 years, but they just didn't. I don't think they like being tied to a job like that. So I grew up with the idea that I wasn't going to work my whole life, because I also couldn't imagine myself. You know, you always like see what your parents do and envision yourself doing something similar. And so I never saw that, and it was never in the back of my mind that I was going to work until 70 or 60 or 50, maybe even 40. And so it's always been a part of my life. And until I actually got into a professional field where I became heavily involved in the technical aspects of finance, did I really like jumpstart this hobby, because I understood how everything started to work. You know, I was reading a lot of books and reading a lot of blogs. And I think one of the interesting things that's happened in the past 5 years is that people have started putting out a lot of blogs and books and
content.
Podcasts.
Yeah.
Just like we are. A little late to the game, maybe.
Yeah. This is going to be like the best one, though.
I really do think so.
Or at least mediocre.
Right. Our parents will think it's really great.
Somewhere between mediocre and awesome. That's what our goal is.
So we came at this from different angles, but now we're working at the same company and we're kind of doing this together. And I think that's really cool. Like the FIRE movement you don't need to have a certain level of education or a certain type of job or live in a certain part of the country or have a certain type of upbringing. Like everybody can come into this and succeed at it. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I agree. So one thing that I think is interesting is that we recently compared our net worths. And I think that was like when we talk about the idea of like friends on fire and friends talking about money, I thought it was like a huge like bonding experience in a way. And we were texting. We always like text about money stuff or like something we just bought or like giving each other a hard time about something money related or encouraging each other about something money related. And at some point we were like texting, and I don't remember how it started exactly. I could probably look up the text string. But I think I was like curious. I knew Mike had been tracking his net worth for maybe your entire life, right?
Yeah.
I had just recently, like in the past few years, I would like off and on kind of like add things up. But in the past like 6 months, I had been like properly tracking it consistently each month. And it's an amazing exercise, which we can get back to. But I was thinking like, I have no idea how my net worth compares to somebody else's. And because we happen to work at the same company, and because Mike happens to work in finance, he knows my salary. He knows everybody's salary. Everyone in like finance and HR knows everybody's salary. So that also opened up us to like being able to have more direct conversations about things. Like when we were having discussions about things, I wasn't having to like talk hypothetically about how much money was coming in versus going. Like we just were very open about those things. And so anyways, point is we compared our net worths. And we're not going to say the exact amount. Maybe someday we'll share that on episode 200. If this gets to episode 200 and we have like a legitimate following, we will share our net worths. Okay.
I think we should do more than that. Like if people are sticking around for 200 episodes just to hear our net worths.
Okay.
We'll think of something great.
Someday we'll share them. It's not that exciting, but someday we'll share them. But my point is two things. One, I have no idea what I'm talking about anymore. I forgot. But it was just cool to see like someone else's net worth, because you have no idea like what anyone else's financial situation is. And back to my point earlier, I'm just always kind of curious what people's financial situation is, because it's a topic I'm interested in and that I like am fascinated by, right? And so it was cool when we compared them. They were very similar. And one thing that I thought was interesting was like Mike, I think, even made the joke that if he had been making the money I was making for that period of time, he was like, my net worth would be way higher. And he's right, because I definitely have like splurged on some things over the years that he never would have spent money on. And he's been a much more aggressive investor than I have, which is a whole nother topic we can get into. I've been overly cash heavy over the years. And so anyways, I just thought it was a very bonding experience and kind of enlightening and like educational because it opened the doors to be able to have a lot of other conversations. And Mike, you alluded to this earlier, briefly made a comment about it, but just the idea of actually tracking your expenses every month and tracking your net worth, that's like step one, right? So if people can do that, and even if they don't plan on doing it forever, if they can do it for some period of time and on a semi-regular basis, update things, I think it can be incredibly eye-opening to where your money's actually going. And again, as much as I was frugal, my money, I wasn't tracking things meticulously, and the places my money was going were like not always, good. And I wasn't always noticing kind of how things were adding up in a way.
Yeah. And if you do those activities together, if you share your net worth and they happen to be within the same range, and if you're tracking your expenses together and you're comparing, like that's a pretty cool bonding experience. That's the type of information that not many people are willing to share, and you would really have no way of knowing it unless someone specifically tells you something. Like you can't tell how much people earn because it's all over the place. Even if you work at the same company, there could be ranges of tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars with what people earn. You don't know what they have. You don't know what they spend their money on. You don't know what their health is like and how much they're paying for medical bills. So unless you actually like share this information with your friends, like you would never know. And you're kind of like, going through life blind, not really knowing like what is the ideal situation to be, like what is the ideal level of spending.
Yeah. And you have no comparison. So I think about like, we always use terms at work like best practices and things like that. But it's like you don't know, no number on its own means anything if you have nothing to compare it to. And so I think, like you were saying, it's really interesting when you can start to compare it to actual friends. And it's not even that it's like a competition. It's like challenging each other to get better. And it really does. Like there's things where I know I'll spend money on certain things that Mike would never spend money on. And that's okay. That's my decision. That's a trade-off I'm making. But it's also just, it can challenge people both ways to, like, for example, I'm going to convince you to buy a Patagonia shirt someday on sale.
That won't be a tough sell because I really look at them all the time.
Because you want one, right?
I do want one. You've been selling them really hard.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm wearing one now. Again, I've forgotten what we talked about. We need like cue cards or something.
Yeah, we really do need to have a better approach to recording these episodes.
Maybe. But back to the Friends on Fire, it's really what started the whole idea of doing this podcast was we were starting to personally find a lot of joy in having these discussions. And we were realizing that money is just a topic that people don't want to talk about. And friends in particular, it's not that they just don't feel comfortable talking about it. They don't go out of their way to talk about it. They will spend more time showing off something they might have or like, talking about something they want to buy, but they would never talk about their actual financial situations. People might make offhanded comments that like they're having a tough time financially or that they're trying to save for something or, whatever, small things. But again, you never really know the inner workings of like any of your friends. And I just think it is a topic that I believe more people should talk about, and more good than bad can come from talking about it, particularly with people that are like-minded and or want to kind of challenge themselves and set better goals for themselves.
And so the long-term goal of this podcast is to not only keep sharing information with each other about our lives, but also share that with other people, have other people on the show to help them share that information with their friends, with their spouses, with their family members, and just kind of explore this topic about talking about money with people and seeing that growth that happens when this discussion is brought up.
Yeah, I think that's great. I'm excited to do this.
I'm excited too. And I'm looking forward to episode 200 when we give away some big prize to our tens of listeners.
Yeah. 20s. I'm aiming for 20s.
In the 20s? That would be really good if we were up in the 20s.
Yeah,
by then.
It's exciting.
All right. Well, I guess we'll wrap this one up and come back to you next time with another topic.
Okay. Sounds great.
All right. Bye, Maggie.
Bye, Mike.